The great hall of the alien kingdom was filled with bright lights and endless voices. It was the day of the royal choosing, a tradition that had taken place for countless generations. The walls glowed with patterns that shifted like flowing rivers, and the air was heavy with excitement. Families gathered in the balconies, waiting to see which royal daughters would be chosen by noble guardians. It was more than just a ceremony. It was a bond, a promise of protection, and a sign of honor. For the princesses, it was the moment that decided their path in life. One by one, the daughters of the royal family walked forward. Each wore robes of shimmering silk that caught the glow of the chamber. The eldest princess, tall and elegant, was immediately chosen by a proud alien warrior with silver armor that glistened like starlight. The crowd erupted in applause, cheering at the perfect match. The next princess stepped forward, and another guardian came to her side. It was the same for each of the sisters. Brave guardians, wise scholars, and noble beings stepped forward to take their place beside the young women. The people cheered louder each time, their voices rising in waves of celebration. But at the far end of the line stood the youngest princess, Leora. She was smaller than her sisters, with eyes as soft as the dawn and hair that fell like flowing night. She stood with hope in her heart, clutching her hands together as she waited. She had dreamed of this day since she was a child, imagining that someone strong and kind would step forward, take her hand, and choose her. She had watched. Her sisters celebrated, their names sung across the kingdom, and she longed for the same. This was her chance to prove that she was not just the youngest or the quietest, but someone worthy of being seen. One moment passed, then another. The chamber, which had been filled with cheers, grew strangely quiet when her turn came. Leora's smile wavered as she stood tall, trying to hide her nervousness. Her eyes scanned the crowd of guardians who lined the hall. There were so many, warriors with sharp eyes, thinkers with gentle expressions, beings of many forms and strengths. Surely, she thought, one of them would come forward. She waited with her heart beating fast, her chest rising and falling with every breath. Yet no one moved. The silence became heavier. Whispers started to rise among the people in the crowd. Some tilted their heads, some frowned, and others began to murmur. "Why does no one step forward?" a voice asked. "Is she not worthy?" another whispered. The words cut like invisible blades, reaching Leora's ears though they were spoken softly. Her cheeks burned, but she kept her head high. She could not show weakness now. One of her sisters, already chosen, turned her head slightly and gave her a pitying look. The queen shifted in her throne, her face unreadable, though her hands tightened on the armrest. The king's eyes were sharp as he stared across the line of guardians, as if demanding an answer without words. Yet still, no one stepped forward. The ceremony master, holding the scroll of names, cleared his throat uneasily, waiting for a movement that never came. The longer the silence stretched, the more painful it became. Inside, Leora felt her heart breaking. She had always known she was different from her sisters. They were confident, bold, and admired. She was quieter, more thoughtful, often lost in her own world. Some said she was too gentle, too soft to hold such a place of honor. She had hoped the ceremony would prove them wrong. Instead, it seemed to confirm their doubts. The words of her tutors and the whispers of servants from her childhood echoed in her mind. She does not shine like the others. She will always be left behind. She tried to push the thoughts away, but they grew louder with each passing second. The ceremony continued to drag on, and still, no guardian came forward. Leora's throat tightened as tears pressed against her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. If no one wanted her, she would not give the court the satisfaction of seeing her cry. She would stand tall, even if her heart felt as if it were shattering into pieces. Her fingers curled tightly into the folds of her dress, hidden from the crowd, the only sign of her inner struggle. The murmurs grew louder, turning into open conversation. Some laughed softly, shaking their heads. "Even the bravest will not take her," someone said. "Perhaps she was not meant to be chosen," another added. Every word felt like a stone placed on her shoulders, weighing her down until she could barely breathe. She wanted to run from the hall, to hide in the safety of her chamber where no one could see her pain. But she stayed, because leaving would be an even greater humiliation. The ceremony master finally cleared his throat again, his voice low and hesitant. "It appears no guardian has come forward." His words echoed like a final bell, sharp and cruel. The chamber fell into complete silence, broken only by the sound of Leora's breath as she stood frozen in place. Her sisters stood with their chosen guardians glowing with pride, while she remained alone, a shadow at the edge of the celebration. Her gaze dropped to the floor, no longer able to hold her head high. The shine of the hall blurred before her as she blinked against the sting in her eyes. In that moment she felt invisible, unwanted, forgotten by all. The cheers that rose again for her sisters only deepened the emptiness inside her. She forced her lips into a faint smile, though it trembled at the edges. It was her shield, thin and fragile against the storm of shame. When the ceremony ended, the crowd began to leave, still buzzing with excitement over the matches that had been made. No one spoke to Leora. No one looked at her. She slipped out of the hall quietly, her footsteps soft against the shining floor. Each step felt heavier than the last, as though the weight of the world pressed against her small frame. The great doors closed behind her, cutting off the laughter and voices of the hall. The silence outside the chamber was cold and unforgiving. She wandered the empty corridors, her heart aching. The glowing walls that once felt warm now seemed harsh and distant. Her hands brushed along the smooth surface as if searching for comfort, but none came. She whispered to herself so softly that even the walls could not hear. "Why not me? What did I do wrong?" No answer came, only the echo of her voice fading into the air. That night, while her sisters celebrated with their new guardians, Leora sat alone by her window. She watched the stars, their light scattered across the endless sky. They seemed so far away, yet each one burned brightly, never forgotten. She wondered if somewhere among them a place existed where she belonged, where she would not be overlooked. Her chest tightened with both sorrow and hope. Though no one had chosen her, she could not let the flame inside her die. Somewhere, somehow, she believed there had to be someone who would see her, not as unworthy, not as invisible, but as herself. In the days after the ceremony, the palace was filled with noise and laughter, but none of it reached Princess Leora's heart. Her sisters spent their hours with their chosen guardians, learning from them, talking with them, and preparing for the futures that now seemed so bright. The halls echoed with joy and confidence. Leora, however, walked alone. Her steps were quiet, her face calm, but inside she carried a storm that no one else could see. The shame of being left unchosen still clung to her like a shadow she could not escape. Not everyone noticed her pain, but one pair of eyes saw what others overlooked. Far from the glittering halls, among the guards and soldiers stationed at the edges of the palace, stood a young human named Aaron. He was not from the alien kingdom. He had come from Earth as part of a treaty that placed human soldiers in service under the alien court. Humans were tolerated but rarely respected. To most, they were weaker, less advanced, and unworthy of standing equal with alien warriors. They were treated as background figures, useful but never celebrated. Aaron had grown used to the quiet stares and the whispers behind his back. He was used to being underestimated, not just here, but even back on Earth. When he first arrived, he promised himself that he would endure whatever came as long as he did his duty. Yet when he saw Princess Leora left standing alone in the Great Hall, he felt something shift inside him. He knew what it was like to be overlooked, to be seen as less than others. Watching her, he felt a deep sense of connection, as if her silence mirrored his own life. That evening, Aaron stood guard in one of the palace courtyards. The sky stretched wide above, filled with twin moons and scattered stars that looked sharper than any he had seen on Earth. The air was cooler here, carrying the faint scent of the glowing flowers planted in the garden. He thought of the princess, sitting alone somewhere in the palace, and he felt a strange mix of anger and sadness on her behalf. How could so many eyes have seen her and yet turned away? How could a room full of warriors and scholars fail to notice the quiet strength in her? He remembered his own past, the way people had once told him he was not strong enough, not fast enough, not worthy of the roles he dreamed of. As a boy, he had been the one chosen last, left out of games and overlooked in lessons. Even when he grew older, training as a soldier, many doubted him. Yet each time he had risen, not to prove them wrong, but to prove to himself that he could stand. That memory burned in him now as he thought of Leora. Perhaps that was why he could not look away from her sorrow. He understood it too well. The next day, while most of the palace was busy with celebrations, Aaron found himself walking through the quieter corridors. His duties did not take him near the royal quarters, but fate seemed to guide his steps. As he turned a corner, he caught sight of her. Princess Leora stood by a tall window staring out at the gardens. The light from the window painted her face in silver glow, and though she tried to keep her expression calm, Aaron could see the sadness in her eyes. He hesitated. Humans did not usually speak to royalty unless spoken to first. It was not his place to disturb her, but something stronger than duty pulled him forward. His boots echoed softly against the polished floor as he approached. She turned slightly, surprised to see him, and for a moment, silence stretched between them. "You're not celebrating with the others," Aaron said gently, his voice low, so it carried no weight of command, only kindness. Leora's lips curved into the faintest smile, though it did not reach her eyes. "There is nothing for me to celebrate," she replied softly. Her words were like a whisper of wind, fragile and almost lost in the empty hall. Aaron wanted to say more, but he held back. He was only a guard, and she was a princess. Yet he could not stop himself from adding, "I saw what happened in the hall. You deserved better than that silence." Her eyes flickered to him, filled with a mixture of surprise and doubt. Most people avoided the subject, pretending not to notice what had happened. To hear a human, someone so low in the eyes of the court, speak of it so plainly caught her off guard. "You think so?" she asked quietly, as if she did not fully believe him. "I know so," Aaron answered, his voice steady. "Being overlooked doesn't mean you are unworthy. Sometimes it only means people are too blind to see what stands before them." For the first time since the ceremony, Leora felt a warmth spread through her chest. His words were simple, yet they carried a truth she had longed to hear. She studied his face, the strong jaw, the steady eyes, the hint of weariness from years of duty. He was not like the others. He did not speak with polished charm or grand promises. His words were honest, plain, and real. She turned her gaze back, to the window, her voice barely more than a whisper. "You speak as if you know the feeling well." Aaron's jaw tightened slightly and he gave a small nod. "I do. More than once." He did not tell her the details, but his silence was heavy with the weight of his past. For a while they stood together, the silence no longer empty but filled with an unspoken understanding. Leora felt her loneliness ease, if only a little. For the first time since that painful night she felt seen. Not as a forgotten princess, not as the one left behind, but as herself. When Aaron finally stepped back, returning to his post, Leora watched him go. Her heart stirred with a strange feeling, one she could not name. It was not the dazzling pride she had expected to feel when chosen by a guardian. It was something quieter, yet stronger, a sense of connection that seemed to reach deeper than tradition or ceremony. That night, as she lay awake beneath the soft glow of her chamber lights, Leora thought of the human soldier who had dared to speak when others stayed silent. She thought of his eyes, steady and kind, and of the way his words had touched her heart. Somewhere inside her, a small spark of hope began to grow. She did not know where it would lead, but she knew this. She was not as invisible as she once believed. Someone had seen her, and sometimes that was enough to change everything. The days passed slowly after that brief meeting by the window. Princess Leora still walked the palace halls quietly, but something within her had shifted. The words of the human soldier stayed with her, replaying in her mind each time she felt the sting of being overlooked. He had said she was worthy, that being ignored did not make her invisible. Those words were simple, yet they were like a shield that softened the sharp whispers of the court. She no longer carried her shame quite as heavily, though the wound still lived inside her. Meanwhile, Aaron continued his duties, standing watch in the courtyards, at the gates, and along the long marble corridors of the palace. He never sought her out, but his eyes often followed her from a distance. He did not know why he cared so deeply for someone so far above his station, yet he could not deny what he felt. He had seen her sorrow, and he could not forget it. In her, he recognized something that echoed his own life. It was during the weekly gathering in the great hall that everything changed. The council had called for a formal celebration to honor the matches made during the ceremony. The chosen princesses appeared with their guardians at their side, their presence meant to show unity and strength to the kingdom. Music filled the chamber and lights shimmered across the walls like flowing water. Everyone seemed content, proud of the bonds formed. Everyone except Leora, who once again walked alone. She entered the hall with grace, but the absence of a guardian at her side was as loud as thunder in the silence that followed her. Heads turned. Murmurs filled the air. Some looked at her with pity, others with scorn. She held her chin high, but deep inside, her heart tightened. She had prepared herself for this moment, yet it still hurt more than she wanted to admit. From where he stood among the guards, Aaron watched. His fists clenched at the sight of her isolation. Every whisper, every sideways glance directed at her struck him like a blow. He wanted to shout at them to stop, to tell them they were blind, but he remained silent. His duty was to stand watch, nothing more. Yet his silence weighed heavier with each passing moment. The celebration continued, but the empty place beside Leora remained like a shadow. The council members shifted uncomfortably, though none spoke of it. They were bound by tradition, and tradition said nothing about a princess left unchosen. To them, it was an embarrassment best ignored, but to Aaron, it was unbearable. At last, when the music faded and the council master began to call each pair forward for formal recognition, Aaron felt his heart pounding. He knew what he was about to do would draw shock, anger, perhaps even punishment, but something deep inside him refused to stay still any longer. He remembered the look in Leora's eyes when she had stood alone in the first ceremony. He remembered her quiet words at the window. He remembered how it felt to be invisible and how much it had meant when someone had seen him. He could not let her endure this moment alone. The council master's voice rang out as he called the names of the guardians and their princesses. One after another they stepped forward to applause and admiration. Finally, the master's eyes flickered toward Leora. His voice faltered, unsure of what to say. For a moment, the silence in the hall was sharp and cutting, like a knife pressed to her heart. And then, a sound broke it. The sound of boots striking against the marble floor. Firm, steady steps moving from the line of guards toward the center of the hall. All eyes turned. A wave of murmurs spread through the crowd as Aaron stepped forward, his head high, his expression calm. He stopped beside Leora and without hesitation he spoke. "I will stand with her." The words hung in the air, heavy and shocking. The hall gasped as one. Never in the long history of the kingdom had a human stepped forward to claim such a role. It was unthinkable against every unspoken rule of the court. Some laughed in disbelief. Others shook their heads in anger. Whispers rose like a storm. A human? Impossible! This is an insult. Leora's eyes widened, her heart racing. She turned to him, her lips parted in astonishment. She had not expected this, not from anyone, least of all him. For a moment she could not breathe. Her mind spun with questions. Why would he do this? Did he not realize what it meant? Yet, as she looked into his eyes, she saw no mockery, no hesitation. She saw only honesty and a quiet courage that steadied her trembling heart. The council master stammered, unable to form words. The king's face darkened with disbelief, and the queen pressed her hand to her lips. The chamber was chaos, laughter, outrage, and shock mixing together like crashing waves. Yet Aaron stood firm, his voice unwavering as he repeated, "I will stand with her." Leora's chest tightened, not with shame this time, but with a strange warmth she had never felt before. All her life she had waited for someone to see her, to choose her, not because of duty or tradition, but because of who she was. And here, in the face of ridicule and scorn, a human soldier had done what no alien warrior had dared. Still, fear crept into her heart. She knew the cost he might pay for such defiance. The council would not accept this easily. The people would mock him, perhaps even demand his removal. Yet even with all those risks, he had stepped forward. That single act shattered the silence that had caged her for so long. The king rose from his throne, his voice booming through the hall. "This is madness. A human cannot take such a place." His words carried anger, but beneath it was something else. Fear of breaking tradition, fear of what others would say. But before anyone else could speak, Leora found her voice. For so long she had been silent, swallowing her pain, but now her heart beat too strongly to remain still. She turned to the king, to the council, and to the crowd that stared at her with judgment in their eyes. "Why not?" she asked, her voice clear though her hands trembled at her sides. "Why not him? He has spoken when others stayed silent. He has seen me when all of you turned away. Is that not the meaning of being chosen?" The hall grew quiet again. Even the whispers faded. No one expected her to speak so boldly. No one expected the quiet, unchosen princess to rise with such strength. Aaron's heart swelled with pride as he stood beside her. He had come forward because he could not bear her loneliness, but in that moment he realized something more. He had not only given her strength, she had given him the same. The silence lingered, filled with tension, but the truth was already clear. Against every expectation, against tradition itself, something new had begun. The young princess, who had once been left behind, was no longer alone, and beside her stood a human who had dared to defy the world for her. The council chamber was heavy with tension after Aaron's bold step. Though the celebration had ended, the whispers from that night still echoed in every corner of the palace. No one could believe what they had seen. A human, standing beside a princess as if he had the right. Many laughed at the thought, but others muttered with unease, for deep down they knew that what had happened could not be undone. The image of the soldier at her side lingered in their minds. The king called for an emergency council meeting. Gray-robed advisors filled the chamber, their voices sharp as they argued. Some demanded Aaron's removal from the palace at once. Others urged caution, fearing that punishing him too harshly would draw unwanted attention from Earth, their ally. At the center of it all sat Leora, her hands folded in her lap, her heart caught between fear and determination. She knew her father's anger, but she also knew that if she let Aaron be cast aside without a word, she would lose more than just a companion. She would lose the only person who had seen her true worth. At last, the council reached a decision. Aaron would not be removed immediately, but if he wished to prove himself as Leora's chosen, he would need to face the trials of guardianship. It was a path reserved for the strongest warriors, a test of courage, loyalty, and heart. Many had failed before, and none of them had been human. When Aaron was told of the decision, he did not flinch. He listened carefully, his jaw set, his eyes calm. Then he nodded once. "If that is what it takes, then I accept." His voice carried no fear, only resolve. Leora, sitting nearby, felt a rush of worry for him. The trials were not meant for someone of his kind. Yet when she looked at him, she saw no hesitation. His courage made her own heart stronger. The first trial came quickly. It was a test of endurance. Aaron was taken to the harsh desert outside the city walls, where burning suns scorched the sands and sharp winds cut like knives. He was given nothing but a flask of water and told to return at the rising of the twin moons. Many believed he would fail before nightfall. Leora stood at the gates as he left, her fingers clenched tightly in her sleeves. She whispered a prayer under her breath, not to the gods, but to his strength. Hour after hour passed. The suns burned the land, and the desert stretched endless and cruel. Aaron stumbled, sweat dripping from his brow, his throat dry as stone. Each step was agony, but he forced himself forward. He thought of Leora's face, of the way her eyes had shone when she had spoken in the hall. He thought of the loneliness she had carried for so long. If he gave up now, he would prove the council right. He would prove everyone who doubted humans right. He refused. By the time the twin moons rose, Aaron appeared at the gates once more. His clothes were torn, his body covered in dust, but he was still standing. The guards stared in disbelief, and a murmur spread through the crowd that had gathered. Leora's eyes filled with tears as she rushed forward, though she dared not touch him in front of so many. Instead, she whispered, "You came back." He gave a faint smile, too tired to say more, but the look in his eyes was enough. The second trial tested his strength in battle. He was placed in the arena against a beast bred for war, its massive form covered in armored scales, its eyes burning with fury. The council watched from above, certain that this would end quickly. Aaron entered with only a simple spear. The beast roared, charging forward, and the crowd gasped. But Aaron did not fight with blind strength. He moved with skill, using speed and timing rather than force. He struck where the armor was weakest, dodging the heavy blows of the creature's claws. The fight seemed endless, but at last, with one final strike, the beast fell. The arena was silent for a heartbeat, then erupted, in stunned cries. A human had done what many aliens had failed to do. Leora watched with her heart in her throat. Every strike, every dodge felt as though it were happening to her as well. When the beast fell, relief washed over her, stronger than any she had known before. She realized then how deeply she feared losing him. The third trial was the most difficult of all. It was not of body, but of spirit. Aaron was placed in a chamber of illusions designed to break the mind and reveal the heart's true weakness. No one could help him, not even Leora. Alone in the dark, he faced visions of failure, of ridicule, of voices telling him he was not enough. He saw himself cast out, laughed at, forgotten, the images pressed against his mind, trying to shatter his resolve. But Aaron remembered Leora's voice, soft yet strong, asking the council why not him. He remembered the way she had looked at him, not with pity, but with belief. Clinging to that, he pushed through the illusions. When he stepped out of the chamber hours later, his face pale but his eyes steady, the council knew they could not deny him any longer. The trials had been meant to break him, yet he had endured them all. Against every doubt, Aaron had proven his strength, not through power alone, but through will, loyalty, and courage. For the first time, murmurs of respect rose among the people. Some still scoffed, but others began to wonder if perhaps this human was not as weak as they believed. And as for Leora, she felt her heart swell with pride. He had not only stood for her, he had fought for her, endured for her, and in doing, so shown her that she was worth every step he had taken. But the council was not finished. Though he had passed the trials, the final decision rested with Leora herself. The question was simple yet heavy. Would she accept this human as her chosen? The answer would come in the days ahead, and though fear lingered, Leora knew in her heart that her choice had already been made. The day of the final gathering arrived. The grand hall was filled once again, every seat taken, every voice buzzing with anticipation. The council sat in their high places, their expressions grave. The king's eyes were sharp as steel, the queen's face unreadable. Warriors, scholars, nobles, and common folk alike filled the balconies, eager to see how the tale of the unchosen princess and the human soldier would end. Aaron stood tall in the center of the hall. His body bore the marks of the trials, scratches, bruises, and the weight of exhaustion, but his posture was unbroken. He held his head high, his eyes calm. He had done all he could. Now the choice was no longer his. Princess Leora entered the chamber, her robes trailing softly behind her, her steps steady though her heart raced. All eyes turned to her, waiting to hear her words. She had been the forgotten princess, the one left behind. Now she stood at the center of the kingdom's attention, with a decision that could change not only her life, but the path of her people. The council master's voice rang out. Princess Leora, you have seen the trials completed. You have witnessed the courage of this human. But the bond of choosing is not complete without your word. Do you accept him as your companion? The hall fell into silence so deep it seemed the air itself held its breath. Leora looked at Aaron. She saw the strength in his stance, but more than that, she saw the heart behind it. He had not faced the trials for glory. He had done it for her, because he believed in her worth when no one else did. Her voice rose, clear and steady, carrying across the chamber. I accept. The silence broke like glass. Gasps filled the hall, followed by a wave of voices, some shocked, some angry, some filled with awe. The king stood, his face hard, but the queen placed a hand gently on his arm, her eyes thoughtful. The council members whispered among themselves, uncertain what to do in the face of such defiance of tradition. But Leora did not waver. She stepped closer to Aaron, her eyes shining with quiet pride. When all others turned away, he stood for me. When others doubted, he endured. This is not about what he is, but who he is, and I will not deny the truth of my heart. Aaron bowed his head slightly, humbled by her words. In that moment, he felt the weight of every doubt he had ever carried lift from his shoulders. He had found a place where he was not invisible, where he was not judged by what he lacked, but valued for what he gave. The hall slowly grew quiet again. Though many still resisted, there was no denying the power of Leora's choice. It was a choice made not by tradition, not by expectation, but by something greater. Trust, respect, and a bond that crossed every barrier. From that day forward, the story of Princess Leora and the human soldier spread across the kingdom. Some mocked it, others celebrated it, but none could ignore it. For the first time, a human had been chosen by a princess, and together they stood, as a symbol of something new, unity between worlds and the courage to follow the heart. Leora, once the princess left behind, was now remembered as the one who changed the path of her people, and Aaron, once the overlooked soldier, became known as the man who stepped forward when no one else would. In the end, what mattered most was not the whispers of the court, nor the weight of tradition. What mattered was the bond between them, born not of duty but of choice. A choice that would carry them through every trial yet to come, side by side,